Now let's look at churn and what churn actually represents. So churn is a decision made at a moment in time. So maybe somebody is completely fed up with the product, it hasn't met their need, or it's buggy, and they've made a final decision that they're going to disengage, delete the app, or unsubscribe. However, what I want you to keep in mind is that churn is not always permanent. It might be that somebody used something for, a particular period of time where it made sense. Then it doesn't make sense for a year, 2 years even sometimes. And then, their life changes again. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I remember this product from X amount of time ago. So it's often situational. And our goal as lifecycle marketers is to understand which type of churn is reversible and what tactics are likely to convert people back. So let's look at some common types of churn. So as we've mentioned, there's situational, timing, or life changes. There's also sometimes a value mismatch. Maybe somebody was looking for something when they downloaded the product, and actually they're just not getting that value that they signed up and paid for. Could also be price sensitivity, and this one kind of overlaps with the situational and life timing or life change section as well, where it could be that, something was affordable to somebody at some point. Again, things have changed in their life, and now they don't have budget for that product anymore. And lastly, it could also be trust or experience issues. Maybe there's been some core problems with the product. For example, users thought that they were signing up for one thing, instead they got something else, or they didn't realize that they were going to get charged at a certain point. But what I want you to take away is that not all types of churn should be won back and can be successfully won back. And I'll go through that in a minute. A really important thing that a lot of teams miss is that the exit experience matters more than you think. A lot of teams are happy to let users churn. They don't send any more messaging. They don't, create any special experience for that. The user churns and they never hear from them again. I think that cancellation is such an important moment for your product to understand more what users are doing and what they're thinking. So take advantage of that and be sure to ask users at the point of exit, why are you churning? Why did you unsubscribe? This can also help to shape re-entry points. For example, if you get feedback that there wasn't a certain feature available, later on you can message users via email, for example, as a strategy, and encourage them to come back because you fixed the thing that was broken for them. A really good example of that is earlier in the course, we talked about an app called LifeSum, and the fact that they had sent an email to users letting them know that they had actually fixed and updated the food tracking part of their app. That is a classic example here where we can, use this information to guide re-entry into the product. And, what you really want to avoid is you want to avoid hostile exits and by that I mean angry users that rage churn, because this can also reduce the chance that they're going to come back and reduce future LTV, right? If somebody's angry, people tend to remember strong emotions. And if somebody's angry with a product, then they're probably not going to use it again. So one thing that can be really effective is surfacing user surveys can give the user a chance to also give their feedback and feel like they've been heard. And that can leave a lasting positive impression. So what do we want to learn from users at the point of cancellation? Well, first of all, we want to collect the basic reasons why they have churned. Then we want to also be looking at the feature usage before churn. Was there a particular feature that they were using? And do you notice that pattern across other users that have churned, for example? Then we want to be looking in the behavioral data at the tenure, so the length of time that they were a user or a subscriber, and the plan type to understand as well which plans are correlating more highly with churn. I would also recommend that you avoid long surveys because, again, if people are trying to exit the product, we don't want to create friction there. We want to create a positive experience for them. And another thing, as mentioned earlier in the course, we don't want to pre-guide answers that we might not already have. So it's okay to leave a couple of options for users to select for the sake of quickness if you're seeing the same reasons over and over again. But it's also really important to leave an open text field so that some users can provide answers that you might not have thought of. And this uncovers deeper insights about what's going on with users and the product. Another thing we want to avoid is guilt-based copy, right? If somebody has already decided something's not for them and they want to leave the product, leave the subscription, then we want to avoid kind of guilting them to come back or making them feel bad about that decision. Again, that's going to leave a lasting impression and not one that's likely to cause that user to come back. When win-backs work and when they don't work, let's look at that. What I want to first explain is that a win-back strategy is a strategy where you message a user with something like either a discount or, as we talked about with the LiveSum example, an update that something's been fixed, and you're trying to get them to come back to the app, either to the app itself or to come back as a subscriber. So I want to just outline some of the best candidates for win-back campaigns. And one of them is long-term subscribers. These are people who got value for a certain amount of time over months or even years. And there's quite a high chance that maybe they're going through some situational blip in their life. They don't need the product temporarily. But, these people at one point loved your product. And so I'm sure they'll love it again in the future if you've got the right strategy to follow up with them. Another example is somebody that had high usage before churn. So maybe this is somebody that burned out, right? You see this a lot with apps like Duolingo, other gaming apps or apps that are heavy in gamification. If somebody loved the game or they loved the streaks or whatever at one point, they're probably going to love it again in the future. They just need a bit of a break. Candidate 3 is the situational reasons. So again, if somebody absolutely loved your product before, but maybe they don't have a use case for it right now, then, in the future, it's likely that they will have a use case at some point. So again, with the right strategy, we can win these people back. And people that have exited calmly, so not rage cancels, as I like to call them, people that, maybe they just decided it wasn't for them, but they still have a positive relationship or a positive connotations of the brand itself. These are also good candidates for win-back strategies. So let's think about the win-back strategies that scale over time. First, reminding users what they're missing out on. That's always an effective strategy. So being able to say to users, you no longer have access to, for example, unlimited storage in a utility app, or you no longer have access to a certain amount of features that you had before. Number 2, highlighting improvements while they left. So feature upgrades, fixing bugs, this type of thing. Being able to reference past usage. So saying, hey, remember before when you were learning Spanish and you were learning every single day? Why don't you come back for a refresher lesson or a bit of practice? And when you time, as we've said throughout the course, when you time messages around relevant moments for users, this is always more likely to work than when it's just kind of fragmented. One thing that I want to caution is it can be quite tempting with win-back to just spam users with discounts to say, we'll give you 20, 30, 40% off. There are some cases where this works, but I think you need to use this strategy with care. So what you want to do is you want to avoid using discounts to bring back low quality users who are just going to churn again as soon as the subscription goes back to the normal price. That is going to inflate your churn numbers, and it's going to make it look like churn is a massive problem for your product when actually the problem is the users that you're bringing back in. You want to use discounts for things like price sensitive markets. So if you have tried to convert a market that maybe isn't so kind of used to subscriptions, as a sort of, they're not used to recurring billing, for example, or maybe this is a country where there's lower purchasing power, that's when discounts can be really effective, because you can always use discounts to test price elasticity. And eventually, if you see that you're really converting people at the discounted price, you might want to consider for that market changing that price permanently over time. And what I would also caution as well is that discounts should really be used as a last nudge so that you're not missing out on revenue and your profit margins aren't getting slimmer. What I would recommend is also to be trying some of these other strategies like resurfacing previous behavior, reminding the user, how they identified with the product. Try things that they've missed out on. Try all of these things first before you jump to discounts, because in some of the apps and products that I've worked with, these strategies have actually worked, and we've saved ourselves, having to offer a discount and potentially leave some money on the table. And yeah, there's some some good points here. You know, first one is that discounts are a bit of a sugar rush, as we say. they train users to wait for sales, to wait for a lower price, and they can lead to what we call expensive churn over time, right? Because people are maybe abusing the discounts. They're saying, yeah, I'll take it at the lower price, but they have no intention of becoming a recurring user over time. And as I mentioned, or as I alluded to in the previous slides, discounts, they sometimes solve pricing problems, or when there's like an issue and you haven't maybe tested price elasticity, but they shouldn't be used to kind of slap a band-aid on product value. If you're not getting any markets to convert, then the problem is probably with the product. It's not going to be fixed just by, showing users discount strategies over time. Let's look at a clear mental model to help you decide when discounting makes sense. So as we talked about, for price sensitive markets, or for users that are on the fence and they just need a little bit of an extra push. Also for ad monetized apps, a discounted sub is better than a zero revenue churn. And always pair a discount with a reminder of the core value that they get by unlocking the premium experience, so that you're priming users for the next renewal to renew at the normal price. And similar to the paywalls, as we talked about earlier in the course, timing beats the urgency of the message, or even like the design of the message itself. So good timing includes things like seasonal relevance. Maybe you want to give a discount round about the holidays, or some kind of festival time where a lot of brands are doing this and it makes sense as a gesture of kind of goodwill. Also with new feature releases. So for example, if somebody has churned because they don't see the value, a discount is a really good match with a new feature, so that you can you can show users the new feature at a lower price point and less barrier to entry or friction to entry. And also to align with use cases. So another good example is if somebody previously was only using one core feature or one feature in the product and not the full benefit of the product, maybe then a discount makes sense there, because they're going to come back and not be using the full value. And remember that deceptive patterns create long-term churn. So what if we're, making users feel guilty, we're putting pressure on them, we're, spamming them with like 50, 30, 20, 10% off, whatever. What you'll eventually find is that, users might convert in the moment, but you'll see a spike in a lot of cases in high refund rates. So people feel pressured, and then after they kind of regret it, and then the next minute you're having to deal with a whole load of support or refund requests. You'll also see shorter subscriber lifetimes. So, you might see somebody that subscribes for a week or a month and that's it. We never see them again. And you'll see that this can also affect the performance of your overall win-back strategy if we're just jumping straight to discounts. So make sure that you, over time, audit your cancellation flows. Make sure the messages that you send are appropriate and relevant. Track the post-cancel sentiment as well. So track and understand why people are cancelling, and ask yourself if a discount makes sense for that cancellation reason. And try your best to replace any sort of friction or even guilt-based messaging with value reminders. And make sure that you measure win-back quality, not just conversion rate. So do these users retain after they come back? Are there refund rates or refund requests? Do the refund rates go down with this new win-back strategy? And how long is the time to second churn? So if a user comes back, are they retaining for a decent amount of time, 3 to 6 months, for example, or are they churning again straight away? And look at the LTV of these users versus new subscribers to understand if these users are actually worth, from a monetary perspective, are these users worth bringing back into the product? So the key takeaways for this section is to respect exits, ensure users have a positive experience when they're leaving the product or when they're churning the product, earn returns. So do it because you're resurfacing value that is still relevant and the user doesn't want to miss out on. And make sure that your CRM messaging, follows appropriate timing patterns and doesn't kind of work based on desperation or discount clutter.